and welcome to episode 124 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week we go so deep into the woods of a new Canadian solar farm that you'd better put on bug spray now.
France orders air-conditioned shops to keep their doors closed when the air conditioning is on. What's next? Banning smoking indoors? Oh, right. They did that in 2005.
GM launches a website to educate owners of electric vehicles. It's too bad the dealerships couldn't also use the service. Wait, they can and should.
Major airlines have all back to plan to capture carbon from the air. Then the carbon will be stored in those airline peanut bags, which are really hard to open. Am I right, people?
All that and more on this summer edition of the Clean Energy Show. First of all, Brian.
Yeah.
I have to ask you how your soiree went.
Oh, yeah. Lovely backyard party. The weather was perfect. It wasn't too sunny. It wasn't too hot. And
that's good. Lovely
little gathering. And only one mosquito in the whole affair,
really?
Which was astounding.
It probably contained malaria or something, considering that
sure,
you're trying to take COVID seriously.
It was a malaria mosquito, but we had really bad mosquitoes at the beginning of the summer. But no, and everybody sat around on the lawn, and I was worried they would get swarmed by mosquitoes. But no, it was you missed a lovely affair.
Did you get your e-bikes yet? Because they're long. You ordered them months ago.
Yeah, a couple of months ago, I ordered two gravel bikes from a company called Ride One Up. And I got the first one about a week ago and put it together, and it seems great. And the other one's been shipped, and it should be coming on Friday. So, it was kind of fun to put together. Like, there weren't too many parts to install. Like, the major components are all installed. I just had to kind of put on the front wheel and attach a few things. The front wheel came with these plastic spindles stuffed into the sort of the hub part, just as protectors. Right. Like, I wasn't sure what they were. I thought maybe it was part of the bike, but I was like, oh no, it's a plastic protector. So you just have to pull them out. But one of them, the plastic spindle broke off and stayed inside the tube.
Oh.
So I had to spend about an hour getting that out. I couldn't seem to do it. I ended up using a drill. I thought, okay, well, I'll get a drill. It's just a plastic piece. I'll kind of drill anyway, I've got these cheap drill bits. I ended up breaking two of them inside the wheel. It was a super simple thing that ended up taking an hour. It was really dumb.
Remind me, because it's been a while, what do these bikes look like? Are they folding, not folding?
No, these are not folding bikes. They look like a kind of a standard bike with a kind of a standard tube thing. They look like normal bikes. The battery is hidden inside the frame, so it doesn't even look like an e-bike really. It just kind of looks like a, standard straight arm, handlebar bikes. It's a gravel bike, so not quite a mountain bike, not quite a road bike. Only had a quick ride. Seems great so far.
So it was good. How does it compare to your other bike?
Yeah, no, I really love the ride of it. It's got a belt drive with only one speed. So you really kind of have to use the power to get going, like, because you can't switch to a lower gear to get going. So there's no throttle. There's just a pedal assist, which has 5 levels. Level 5 is insane. You hardly have to do anything. And then, so you could maybe, level 3, 4, 5 when you're starting out. And then as you're cruising, you can kind of turn it down to 1 or 2 or even to off once you're cruising. But so far, love it because it's really kind of like a regular bike. And it's the type of like frame size and shape that I really like.
I find it a challenge to understand how I should be using the pedal assist.
Yeah.
Because my instinct has always been, and I have to fight this, is to go fast.
Yeah.
But you don't need to go fast. I mean, you wouldn't normally go fast.
Yeah.
So my challenge on my e-bike is to figure out which pedal assist to use, because I find that I'm going as fast as I can, which is A, a little bit dangerous, and B, not good for the battery. So it goes down faster. But I wouldn't normally drive that fast. I think it's okay to go a little faster than you normally would. I mean, what's the point of having an e-bike? You can cover more territory if you're exploring or something like that. But yeah, I just have to sort of tone it down to like level 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5, and then sort of find that speed that works with my pedaling, so that I'm not doing pedaling. You want to do some pedaling. You don't want to do it too hard. You just got to find that sweet spot. And that takes some learning, I find.
no doubt.
But you're happy with it, eh? And you got a second one coming.
Yeah.
Didn't you order them both at the same time? Why wouldn't they both come?
And they were planning to ship them at the same time, but obviously, I don't know, their orders are backed up, so they decided to ship them separately.
Okay. Well, it's good that you're finally getting them in time for summer. Lots of summer left. A couple of good months of riding weather. And you said that you were going to go to Tesla in a whole different city yesterday or tomorrow.
Yeah, so I've got a squeaky steering wheel in my Tesla. When you turn the wheel, it makes a squeaking sound, and it's starting to get kind of annoying, and I figured I better get this taken care of. I've Googled it. It sounds like it's a somewhat common issue that maybe the whatever belt or cable wasn't lubricated enough at the factory, so this happens quite a bit. Tends to happen in the winter in the cold, and it did squeak a bit in the winter, and then it went away. And now in the heat of summer, it's kind of come back. But nearest Tesla service center is 2.5 hours away. They have for now suspended the mobile ranger service. They used to come down from Saskatoon every couple of weeks and deal with the people in our city. But I assume because they're just so busy, you've seen it. There's just now lots of Teslas on the streets around here.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's really
and I see new people on the forums.
Yeah.
Regular people, not lifelong EV wanters, just regular people buying cars.
No, and you get more people, obviously, like when they talk to me about my car, who are thinking about it. We may end up talking about this later in the show or next week, but I don't know, that EV tipping point, Bloomberg says we've reached the EV tipping point, which is around 5% of sales, and that's when the S adoption curve starts to go vertical, and you can just feel it in the air that people are ready to go electric. But so there's no mobile ranger service, unfortunately, which would probably be the perfect way to fix this, because it sounds like it's fairly simple. You take off the plastic on the steering column and you just do some spraying. And Tesla owners have even done it themselves, but it's under warranty, so I'd rather have them do it.
So you drive 2.5 hours away to do it, Brian?
Well, that's okay. Booked an appointment for tomorrow to do it. I'm retired. I thought, I've got the day to spend, but I don't know. I'm just busier than I thought I was going to be, so I had to cancel it. And
so what would you do food-wise when you went up there to the
food-wise?
Yeah, you're going to plan, culinary delights while you're there. It's a vacation of sorts.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what's near I assume I would drop the car off at Tesla and then go for a coffee or go for a sandwich or something, but I haven't looked into what's near there yet.
There's nothing near there. It's in an industrial area.
Damn it. Well, I can take my folding electric bike then, put it in the trunk, and then I can bike wherever I want.
That would be an adventure.
Yeah. That'll be the thing to do.
That would be a very cool thing to do, actually.
Yeah, which is why I bought the folding electric bike, because I thought that would be perfect. Or if you're on the road and you need to leave your Tesla charging for half an hour somewhere and there's nothing nearby that you want to eat, boom, pop on the electric bike and go eat and come back.
Once in the Prius, I was headed to the mountains with 3 or 4 bikes on the back.
Yeah.
And a full family and luggage. And we hit a headwind and we're going to run out of gas.
Yeah.
I said, no, we don't need, this was between around Brooks, Alberta, where it gets windy. Yeah. And I had the thing reliably showed me that I had plenty of, range, but it started going down really fast, and I panicked. I started driving really slow and going into EV mode. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got a bike on the back. I can do the last couple miles on a bike maybe. And I don't buy a jerry can. But it was an extra bit of security, when you are facing, isolation like that in the middle of nowhere.
But you made it without having to do that?
With 2 kilometers left. And I did so by slowing down, but the family was panicked. That was a long time ago. It was 10 years ago, but family was panicked. And
range anxiety is a thing even with gas cars.
Yeah. And, the wind kills, Prius is a very aerodynamic vehicle, but not with bikes on it. And
we have very bad wind here.
So I learned something in the news this week. There's a volcano in Japan, and every news story about this Japanese volcano talks about how the nuclear plant is okay nearby. Oh. And you think about all the different things that affect nuclear plants, like tsunamis and earthquakes and things like that. Volcanoes has never come into the mix. I've never heard of that one before.
Yeah.
But the volcano is 20 kilometers away, and it was spewing 2 kilometers worth of blast debris
Yeah, that's not great. Well, of course, Japan's a very small island, a very small country. So it sort of seems like everywhere that they put a nuclear power plant is a little bit dangerous. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And they're just starting to deploy offshore wind, which seems like a good idea. I mean, they've shut down nuclear because of the disaster at Fukushima, and, the country is not crazy about it right now.
Okay, so news from France. They have ordered air-conditioned shops to save energy by shutting the doors. So this sounds crazy, but often air-conditioned shops just leave their doors open. And I haven't
really?
I haven't experienced it around here, but do you remember that from when you lived in Toronto? Because it would happen in Toronto.
I do remember it from Hawaii.
Right.
And I thought that's absurd.
Yeah.
Why would you wouldn't leave your door open in winter and let the heat go out? Why would you let the air conditioning go out?
Yeah. And I used to encounter this when I lived in Toronto. Like you'd be walking down Bloor Street and it would be crazy hot because Toronto gets crazy hot and humid in the summer. And you'd go by like a fancy clothing shop, an expensive clothing shop, and sure enough, they would just have the doors propped open. But you'd walk by on the sidewalk and you'd get this wonderful waft of cold air beckoning you to
Maybe
come
that's
into
why they did it. It's like KFC putting spices out into the community to bring people in.
Yeah, and I think they probably do this in Las Vegas as well, which gets very hot, and, to entice you to come into the casino.
Yeah.
So, it seems crazy, and, I'm an energy conscious person. I don't like to be wasteful. So like never in a million years would I consider doing this, but it's a big enough problem that France had to create a rule to stop doing this. Cause you're using, it says 20% more energy consumption by leaving the door open, which seems kind of low. I would think it would be more like 30 or 40% more energy. So they had to, start threatening fines. You can get a €150 fine if you leave your doors open with an air-conditioned shop in France.
Talk about wastefulness. That's just like an old, energy is cheap, we've got plenty of it mentality probably from past times. Yeah,
and I don't know why I've thought this way, and I think you've always been the same way, but I just hate, wastefulness. And even back in the days when we, drove gas cars and, I was always been interested in like sports cars and stuff, but like a turbocharged 4-cylinder was always more interesting to me than a big V8 engine, which just uses way more gas. Like, I just hate wastefulness. And, it just seems crazy that people do that.
Now, I remember 15 years ago or so posting an article from the Globe and Mail to my local blog where my friends went, and it was about driving efficiently, how to save 25% of gas.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who drove a big boat out. Talk about your Canadian accents. A big boat out, like 30 kilometers away. He commuted into town to.
And by boat, you mean a big car,
a big vehicle. Yeah. So it was a gas guzzler, and. He was like, oh, wow. And then he started doing it. And he said, yeah, I am saving 25%. And it's basically not having a lead foot. And it's something, this is why I posted this. I've been doing that all my life because it was common sense.
Yeah.
Like I would never have a full gas tank when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And, I'd be putting $5 in the tank and stretching it as far as I could. I remember going to a job interview that ended up being a vacuum cleaner salesperson door to door. And I didn't know it was until like the next day because they don't tell you.
Yeah.
They just say it's a great job and get you pumped up. And I was thinking, I'm not going to make it. And I somehow did. But anyway, basically, you cruise. If you see a stoplight up ahead, you don't floor it.
No.
You just coast.
Yeah.
If you can, if there's nobody behind you, especially, just coast. I mean, you do that in EVs too. And sometimes you regenerate from the braking. And then you just accelerate slowly. And it's mostly just common sense. But it does. I see all these people now with gas prices exorbitantly, record highs ever. Yeah. And they're like flooring it. And I'm thinking, it's not the distance between A and B. It's how you drive as well. Like, 25% of $200 is a lot of money on somebody.
Yeah, and I do try and also drive conservatively in my Tesla.
Sure.
But at the same time, I know in my head that, electric cars are just way more efficient with the energy that they use. So it is less of an issue. And I definitely drive more, which I think we're going to talk about in a story from Norway. But because it's more efficient and because it costs less to drive, I've put on tons of miles in the Tesla, way more than when I had a gas car.
And we did that in the Prius, and my family was sort of restricted because we were kind of poor when we started out and bought our first house. Yep. We didn't get around much, and then really gave us the mobility to go to little parks and things near the city and just expand our horizons. And that was really cool. And my oldest kid really is into exploring. And, we did lots of little trips just driving around, and it didn't cost much. It didn't pollute as much as it would have. But it was unnecessary as well. But
yeah. And I love to go to Moose Jaw, as you know, which is a lovely small city, 45 minutes away. And I feel much better about doing that in the electric car. It's cheaper and less wasteful.
There is no moose in Moose Jaw, though. I mean, there's a plastic one. Yeah. But you don't see moose running around Moose Jaw. It's not even moose territory, is it?
No, and no one's really sure why the city is called Moose Jaw. They
probably found the jaw of a large rat once and said, "Oh, that's a moose jaw, and let's call it Moose Jaw."
Yeah.
This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Anyway, let's get on with another story that I'm very interested in talking about. I'm fascinated by this stuff, Brian. I'm fascinated by solar energy because I have solar panels on my roof, and I have started out with a solar panel on my camper. So, it sounds simple, a solar panel for $100 from a hardware store for your camper that just charges a 12-volt battery, not, a deep cycle 12-volt battery that's a little different than your car battery, but basically the same. But it was so cool that, I remember my kid saying, "Oh my God, I charged my phone off the sun." Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
He was charging his phone in the camper, and it was like the sun somehow made energy to charge his phone 100%. So he had a solar power phone. I would play with that panel, and I would adjust it, just in the driveway because I was just playing around, and I thought this is cool. And you would adjust it at different angles and see that the voltage go up, it would go up, between up to like 14 volts and something like that. And you would see the different angles. And then in the evening, I would point it, track it. I would track the sun and go out and see that it wasn't, pointed at the sun and a few hours later. So I would point it there and it would go way up again. So I saw the benefit of solar tracking that way, just in a very practical way. But when I saw solar farms traveling through the United States, the existing ones that have been around for a while, they're just fixed.
Yeah.
They are pointed to the ideal situation. And most of them are here, too, if they're on a farm or something, larger solar installations that aren't utility, because we're just finally getting utility installations in Saskatchewan. So they would be pointed at the ideal thing for the maximum annual solar production.
Which around here, I think, is about 45 degrees.
Something like that, which is higher than most things. We're about, 50 degrees latitude or something like that? I can't remember. Something like that, in the low 50s at worst. So, and they're in the 30s down in New Mexico and places like that. So it changes the angle. We tilt it more upward to hit the sun because the sun is further south in a way.
Lower in the
However,
sky.
I was thinking of putting solar panels on the wall of my house and with the solar installation because I thought, in the winter, the sun here is really low.
Really low.
Like it's like it's setting. Like it's, it's hardly up in the sky practically in the worst part of winter. And the solar people said eventually, we actually ran the numbers and said that you would get that. So we've got an interesting story, I believe, next week where we're going to talk about vertical solar panels and how that's actually an interesting study that's been done on that. So I was thinking, but then you would get more in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. Okay. But you don't care about that. What you want is the optimal. You want to make hay while the sun shines in the summer, longer days, sun's further up. So you find that ideal angle, you get the most solar production you can. But the conventional thinking is that when you do tracking, which requires mechanical equipment, right? It's got to move the solar panels to follow the sun from sun up to sundown, and then it resets itself. And also bifacial panels, which pick up radiation off the ground, solar radiation, reflected back off the ground. So you're getting it from both sides of the panel, but it adds cost. So I've been fascinated with the question of what is the payback, and is there a bigger payback in Canada because we have got snow cover in the wintertime that reflects snow better?
Yep.
But the answer turns out to be not really, because we do have such crappy solar in the winter that it turns out that even with the high reflectivity of snow, that it doesn't do a whole lot. But apparently it's worth it, because all the solar farms in Canada now that are being built have single axis tracking and bifacial panels. So I'll just go over that again. Single axis tracking is basically laying solar panels on a big rod. Okay, so they're flat at noon, which is not ideal for noon, by the way, because, like you said, it would be like 45 degrees or something like that, be tilted up towards the sun. But what these do is they face the rising sun, they tilt to the side and face the rising sun, and then track it across the sky, and then tilt down the other way in the afternoon and follow it that way. And apparently that is ideal way, the single axis tracking. There's different kinds of tracking. There's tracking where you'll see a cluster of panels, almost like a big flat satellite dish that follow the sun. Even private residences have these. They're expensive. The trick is, not only do they add expense because you have mechanical equipment and more weight involved, but they require maintenance because there's moving parts. So the conventional wisdom has been to just add more panels. Panels are cheap. Just add more panels. That's
Instead
the better way
tracking.
to go. But with all these solar installations, including a couple that have just started in our province, the very first ones ever that are connected to the utility, there was just one last week connected at Weyburn. It's a 10 megawatt farm. So I contacted the company, who are actually located in Halifax, Canada, in Nova Scotia, where my family actually comes from, that area. But it's like 4 time zones away. It's a long ways away from here. Yeah. And Halifax and Nova Scotia is not noted for its sun. Saskatchewan is. But that's where this company is located. I contacted them, and they got back to me. They sent it to their construction team and got me a letter back. So I want to read it to you. I thought it was interesting. And, people are interested in solar, might be interested in this. He said there's a few factors at play here, and obviously these figures are rough. And the first point is fixed tilt versus single axis tracker. That is a fixed solar panel that's just mounted at the best optimal way, which is how ours are on the sun. Ours on our house are not optimal, but they're fixed. And the tracker at this installation, which is, oh God, Brian, can you pronounce the installation?
Pesakastew?
It's been done in collaboration with 2 First Nations, I believe. So it's this company and 2 First Nation partners, and they had an agreement with the utility, which is government run here, by the way. So they got a 14% bump in production
From the tilting single axis.
So if you add the tilt, you get 14% more. It's a small solar farm. It's only 10 megawatts, and they say that it can put out more than that, but they're only licensed to put out 10. So in the summer, they'll actually waste electricity in order to get more, off season.
Yeah.
So the bifacial aspect of it, that is the stuff that picks up from the bottom of the panel, bifacial, which is 2 faces, adds only 4% in production. So the key consideration, they say, in this is the ground cover. Ground cover reflects differently different times of the year and with different materials. They say it's how closely you stack your modules together, row to row, matters. So that is, that makes sense, right? Because if they're all close together, I've often been questioning, why are these panels close together? This is a question I've asked other people, and they haven't answered back. Well, this is a good reason. If they're bifacial, you don't want it all to be shadow. You want it to be sun between the rows of panels. So Yeah, they're spread out, less shading there is from one row to another, and the more effective the bifacial generation is. The level of generation in Weyburn, which is this, it's an hour and a half south of us. The level of generation in Weyburn during the winter is very low, roughly 3 or 4% per month of total annual production, November through January. And it's 12 to 14% in May through August. So this is the reflectivity. So even in winter, the reflectivity of, off of snow is only 3 or 4% because the sun is so low in the sky and the days are so short and you're only getting good sun for a handful of hours, whereas you're getting it for like 10 hours in the summertime, like really good sun.
Yeah, this is why grid connection makes sense for solar where we live, because it's very hard to be off grid where we live because the production is so low in the winter.
They mentioned that the tracker is a mechanical system which works very well in cold climates and other cold climates, including the U.S. And on recent projects, the tilt function can be used to shed snow, which is something that I have heard about and mentioned on the show.
Yeah.
So basically, if it snows, you turn the solar panels all the way to one side and dump that snow off.
Yeah.
That in itself has to add numbers. You would have the numbers based on the computer projections of how much snow cover yours get covered with snow. I mean, if you could dump the snow off your panels, your production would go up, a couple percent or something like that.
Yeah.
So that is important, and that adds to the cost. So the extra cost of the tracker needs to be considered with the foundation requirements. So you got to put more money into the foundation when you're building these things and mounting them into the ground. But you're looking at roughly 30% increase in costs for a tracker relative to a fixed system, which is quite a bit.
Yeah, but that's a sort of a one-time cost at the time of installation, whereas these gains that you're getting, it sort of looks like, 14% from the tilting, 4% from the bifacial. You get those gains every year, and hopefully the system lasts 25, 30 years. So that 30% extra, that sounds like that would pay off.
And by the way, we know that solar panels are often warranted to last 25 years at a certain percentage of output, and they can last 30 or 40 years. Maybe not all the panels do. But this system is only, the systems that they're putting in Canada now are only 20-year programs. So they reassess it at 20 years and they say, well, do you want to, have another agreement from us in 20 years and buy the different output of power, which will be smaller, or do you want to use the same land to put up new panels, which I believe probably would be cost effective 20 years from now because the panels are going to be so cheap that they get 100% production and life out of them. You probably just use the mounting hardware, do some minor repairs on that. I'm just guessing. I'm speculating. Mm-hmm. There might be people yelling at me right now, but the other option is to reclaim the land in 20 years. But that to me seems like a waste. They built it there, Brian, because there's a substation for the utility grid there, which is, a place where you can connect all this electricity and you don't have to build any infrastructure. So that's important in the placement where you put these things. So, yeah, but I did some more research, Brian. We're not done yet. I looked at what other people are saying around the web and the studies that have been done. There's some sites that say that tracking increases output by 20 to 30% in the United States. Keep in mind, most installations in the United States are in the south, like New Mexico, Arizona, and all that. So you're getting more consistent sunshine and longer days in the winter. They're more often in the south. But unless space is limited, it's usually still kind of cheaper to just add a few more fixed panels, some people say. So a team of researchers modeled the performance of various solar designs. This is from pvtech.org. A team of researchers modeled the performance of various solar designs based on NASA irradiation figures. That is basically the amount of solar power in any given place. They've mapped it out on an annual basis based on climate and all that. So the results, checked against field data, showed that mixes of bifacial and single-axis trackers, like the ones we're talking about here, carried the lowest levelized cost of electricity across 93.1% of the areas under analysis. And so my question was, is our area one of those areas? Apparently it is. So levelized cost of electricity, we talk about this, I'll just remind people, that is the cost of a unit of electricity over the lifetime of a power plant, regardless if it's a solar plant or a nuclear plant. And the question about nuclear is that if you say it's going to cost $1 per unit of electricity over the 50-year span and you don't run it 100%, then that dollar goes to more than $1 because, you still had to spend all the money to build that nuclear plant and maintain it, and you're making less electricity. Therefore, the cost per unit goes up. And that is a big question that I have with renewables competing against nuclear, is that cost is even more than what they claim it is. So this is interesting because Germany is a good comparison to us, Brian. Not in some ways, they're the same place on the globe as us, but they're much cloudier than we are here in the Canadian prairies, the plains of Canada, where the mountains sort of affect the sunshine because they, affect the cloud cover. We got lots of sun here. But it's a northern sun, so it's, the days are shorter in the winter and all that. But Germany had a 19% lower levelized cost of electricity with one-axis tracking, the same as what we're talking about, and bifacial panels. So the same thing. In Germany, it was a 19% lower levelized cost of electricity. And maybe that's a question I should have asked them, and maybe I can follow up with that, is how the levelized cost of electricity lowers. That is the big question. So, but Brian, it's interesting that Germany was the same as Arizona. Yeah. And you don't equate Germany with Arizona, do you? Mm-hmm. Arizona is sunny and south. Germany is cloudy and north.
So it's the same kind of gains wherever you are.
Yeah. It seems like the more cloud and the more north you are, that the more like this makes up for it. Like this still is beneficial to track the sun and use reflectivity. So the bifacial module typically sees a maximum power increase of 5 to 25%. The performance increase strongly depends on the amount of light reflected onto the rear side of the module, which is governed mainly by the surface albedo, or ground reflectivity. Stand by, people. We'll get to more simple stuff here later in the show, I promise. But the ground reflectivity is interesting because I thought, snow is the optimal one. So yeah. The more light from the ground, it increases the gain of the bifacial. So clear dirt ground may have an albedo of approximately, this is clear by meaning no vegetation, 10 to 15% reflectivity. So it reflects 10 to 15% of the incoming light. Grass is 15 to 25%. So grass is better than just dirt. Light gravel and sand are 25 to 35%, and snow is way up there at 60 to 80%. However, in Canada, because the light is so much from a low angle and shorter days, it's not making that much of a difference, apparently.
Wow.
But still worth it.
Yeah.
Still worth it. So, so the way you design your plants, and they might use sheep to control vegetation at this site here. So you can have sheep grazing, and, we talk about agrivoltaics where people can grow crops. That's a thing, like maybe a certain crop, if a wheat crop or something might have a good reflectivity. Yeah, so that's very interesting, and I'm sorry, but I'm interested in this stuff, and I can't get enough. I really love to know. And it all goes back to me tilting my little solar panel on my camper around and watching the voltage go up and down. Yeah,
and I think we've talked about, hopefully maybe later this summer we can do a road trip down to this solar farm and have a look. That'd be nice.
It'd be great, and it'd be even greater if we could talk to somebody, but they've probably moved on to other projects. Maybe SaskPower could send somebody down.
Okay, so we've got a story here from Clean Technica. As we know, airlines are under a lot of pressure to reduce their carbon emissions, and not just from governments, but particularly in the EU. The EU is really trying to lower emissions for airlines, but also from consumers. There's people are starting to have an awareness now of how much pollution it causes to fly, and so this is being driven in part by customers. People don't want to burn tons of carbon to fly somewhere. So several major airlines, so these are some of the biggest in the world: Air Canada, Air France, EasyJet, Lufthansa, Virgin Atlantic. They've all signed letters of intent to explore opportunities for future supply of carbon removal credits from direct air carbon capture technology. Now, we have high hopes here on the show for electrified airplanes one day. I mean, it is possible to have zero emission airplanes someday, either using electric and batteries or possibly with a type of green hydrogen maybe. But the airlines are probably realizing that that kind of technology is still quite a long way away. So they're kind of banking on this direct air carbon capture technology, or perhaps, this is a delay tactic to get the regulators off their backs for how much carbon they produce. And to be clear, this would not be related to the airplanes themselves. The airplanes are going to fly as normal. The airplanes aren't going to capture carbon. These would be ground-based installations. And this is technology that exists that can capture carbon directly from the air and store it somehow, like in little airline peanut bags. And it's, so it's a carbon offset scheme. So theoretically, an airline could build their own carbon capture things and capture as much carbon as they're producing in their airplanes. Now, the cost is just not there yet in terms of direct, air capture. It's still insanely expensive. So this is not possible right now. So, whether this is, a type of greenwashing and just a way to kind of get the regulators off their backs, I'm not sure, but it is something that needs to be explored, and this is a possibility, I guess, for air travel in the future.
Now, everybody I read, all the climate experts and climate tech people are very against carbon capture because it doesn't go to solving the climate crisis very well.
Yeah, at best, it's a neutral kind of thing.
Making, say, a green hydrogen airliner would be a better option, than putting the carbon into the atmosphere and trying to suck it out.
But to be fair to the airlines, none of this technology is here yet. Yeah. So early days, and we'll keep following how it goes with the airline industry.
Now, rich celebrities always offset their carbon, right?
Right.
They were flying in private jets. But you look at the Elon Musk jet flying around, they always have the carbon, megaton or tons of carbon. It's bad. It's several tons of carbon. It's what people, his little jaunt from San Francisco to LA is, like 5 people's annual carbon output. It's not good. Our earlier discussion about being wasteful, it was something that wasn't maybe on my radar 20 years ago, but now it is. It's like, oh man, flying in a jet is just super wasteful in terms of, just resources and pollution. So I haven't flown in about 5 years. It partly because of that, partly because I, kind of had nowhere to be, and then partly because of the pandemic. I am expecting to fly again sometime before the end of the year, but this is all kind of part of the equation. Brian, I want to thank, from our previous story on solar in Saskatchewan, Canada, Amy from NaturalForces, which is a great name for a company. We have a Natural Resources Canada. This is NaturalForces, naturalforces.ca. There's information on this solar project near Weyburn, Saskatchewan, Canada, and other projects that they're working on. And they were very helpful, and I'm just so appreciative because I know they're busy. They took the time to give us a really good answer on that. So I appreciate her and her team on the ground who got back to her on that. GM is launching EV Live, a free one-on-one virtual education service with EV specialists. Just off the top, your thoughts? Just on the general concept, is this a good idea? This is a website, by the way. This is a website where you can actually go live. You can book an appointment and have a live consultation with people at GM, and this is their full-time job. I think it's a good idea. Yeah, more education is always better. GM should probably just focus on building more EVs, but, I guess, education is always part of the equation too. Well, the problem has always been that the EV dealers don't know jack. You know how you and I will buy a stereo or a TV and we'll go to the store and we'll know way more. Well, It's like that with a lot of people because you do a bunch of research if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on something. Yeah. And the teenager at the store knows nothing. And it's a frustrating experience. Going to Home Depot. Yeah. And if you know how to fix something and you've been thinking about it and working on it, and they don't know anything half the time. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, depending on who you get. But this is a EV Live. It's called an immersive one-on-one experience where the public can call into a live studio of EV specialists and have all their questions answered virtually. Now, according to GM, EV Live will also be available to assist its own network of dealers and employees. That is a good thing. I know they have training sessions. I know they have videos probably. But they're so ensconced in, ICE vehicles, combustion, gas and diesel. And they have such a hard, it's been a slow learning curve. I've heard from people in town here trying to buy an EV. They say some of them are coming along and some of them, but they're laughing at people in some cases. They like, you want to buy an EV, do you? How cute. But
they've got a lot full of gas cars they have to sell.
And now they're selling EVs and they don't realize, like a GM, for example, that they're going to sell nothing but EVs. That is the plan. So you better get with the plan or you're going to be a fossil yourself. So to begin with, only one-on-one sessions will be available via reservation, but group tours will become available later this year. And GM also intends to provide pre-recorded sessions in the future as well. I think I might actually, it's possible I could use this service. Well, this would be better. Like say I'm going to buy the Bolt, and we're looking at buying the Bolt if we can find one. I would maybe better go to these guys online than the local dealership who doesn't know Jack or is only starting to know a few things. That might be an interesting addition to it.
Yeah, if you can find a way on the web to just buy the car and bypass a salesperson, that would be ideal.
And by the way, everyone, we like to hear from you. Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com is our email. We're on Twitter and TikTok, Clean Energy Pod. We're on YouTube. Check out our YouTube channel for video of the show and special features. You can leave us a voicemail feedback at speakpipe.com/cleanenergy. Brian from Bloomberg. Electric cars are starting to cover more miles than their gas counterparts. We always talk on the show about Country X is now at 5% of new car sales are EVs, or 10%, or in Norway's case, 90% have a plug, like covering EVs and plug-in hybrids. So Norway, of course, is the world leader in this, as we've said for a long time. Their adoption started before everyone else, and for reasons that have to do with the band Aha, which I can't get over that.
We've covered on the show.
It's incredible. So Norway is the country that gives us a hint of what the future will look like, because all countries are going to go this way. At least, the industrialized countries, the first. So EVs are now traveling more miles than gas cars, and the idea is that this is the important thing. We talk, even if a country is, say, selling, 30% of their new cars are electric, that doesn't mean the whole fleet of vehicles in that country is 30% electric. It just means that it's slowly creeping up every year at that rate. Well, in Norway, the more miles are being driven. That is the key factor. More miles are being driven on electric than on gas.
Yeah, well, I started talking about this off the top of the show. So I've had my Tesla Model 3 standard range for almost 2.5 years. And it's got 56,000 kilometers on it, which is 30,000 some miles. And that's just way more than when I had a gas car. And it's because it's kind of like that phenomenon. People mention this like with energy efficient lighting, right? Like if you've got light bulbs that use 10% of the electricity, you're more likely to leave them on more. Like you're going to be less concerned about turning them off. And so a naysayer will say, well, that wipes out any savings that you have from going with the cheaper bulbs. But no, that's not true, because these bulbs, they use, 10% of the electricity, but you don't leave them, you leave them on maybe, slightly longer. It's still like a vast, vast savings. So in our family, we still have one gas car. So, but we drive the electric as much as possible because it's just cheaper and better and less polluting and all that. So some of the miles have been taken from the gas car, and then some of the miles have been added just because I drive more. I mean, I'll, happily drive to Moose Jaw for breakfast because it's a more efficient and cheaper way to do it.
What do you have for breakfast to Moose Jaw?
Listen, I want to give a plug to the Grant Hall Hotel in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Man, that is a deep dive, Brian.
It's a lovely restored hotel, a vintage building. and they have a lovely breakfast.
How did you find out about this? Did somebody recommend it to you?
Well, I was trying to go to the diner. There's a diner on Main Street, and it was closed. And then we remembered, there's this renovated hotel, and we went there.
So you just found it on your own.
Highly recommended. And, Burton Cummings lives in Moose Jaw. Did you know that?
Burton Cummings from the Guess Who? Rock star from the 70s?
Yeah, rock star Burton Cummings. He
lives in
Moose
this
Jaw.
tiny city in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, and I keep expecting to run into him at the Grand Hall Hotel, but I haven't yet.
You probably would. What would you say? Hey?
But anyway,
American
what
woman?
were they? So in Norway, it's not like the whole fleet in Norway is still probably less than 50% electric. I don't know if you have the figure there.
I don't.
Let's say it's 30% of the fleet is electric, but people are using that part of the fleet more. So now this sounds like it is the majority of miles driven in Norway are electric, which is amazing.
So 50% of your personal fleet is electric, but most of your miles are driven on electric.
Yeah, exactly. I would say probably 75% of my personal fleet is electric.
Yeah. So this is huge news. It shows it doesn't matter how many EVs are in your country's fleet. It matters more how many miles are covered. And I bet, Brian, that balance is tipping more towards the EVs because we drive electric here more than when gas prices was half as much, right?
Yeah.
It's like we displaced an SUV as our city secondary car with an EV. And then we realized, well, we like the EV. We were driving the EV all the time. It's so cool to have an EV. So more miles got displaced from gas, from our other gas car. So a 2-car family example, in this article says that some people are gravitating towards EV once they get used to it. So once they get used to it, like us, we prefer it.
Yeah.
And the combustion car is used for longer trips in some of these countries. Not for you. The longer the trip, the more you want to take the EV, although you have taken the gas car in winter just to not have the hassle.
Yeah.
So Bloomberg says a few years ago, oil companies predicted EV miles would be small even after many EVs were sold. And boy, are they wrong. So just don't look at the EVs sold. Miles driven might be just as important in determining how EVs are displacing oil.
Yeah, and we're just at the beginning of that S-curve now. Like it only takes about 5% of new sales to be electric when the adoption curve, it's going vertical, and this is going to happen super fast.
And it's time for the lightning round. This is where we take a fast look at the rest of the week's headlines in clean energy and climate change. Brian, this was supposed to be a short show, and of course it's gone not only normal length, but long. Can't believe it. There's just so much to talk about. Always so much to talk about. How can we not talk about it? Because we love this stuff. The U.S. Postal Service says up to 40% of their new delivery vehicles will be electric. Of course, why not 100% or 90%?
Yeah, so this is a story we've covered before. There was, a series of disappointing announcements that the postal fleet was only going to be a tiny amount electric, and then they made a deal for a bunch of gas cars. Well, they've increased that number for electric a couple of times now. It's still too low. It should be 100%, but 40% of the fleet going electric, well, I guess that's better than nothing.
Ford is testing a robotic charging station to help disabled drivers plug in. So Tesla has teased many years ago a snake-like robotic charger to find that plug and charge it in. Of course, wireless charging is an option if you want to go that route, and I guess that technology is making some progress. But yeah, I don't know what kind of a market disabled drivers would have. I mean, I'm getting old, so maybe it would be a benefit to me. You know what? I think this is a good idea. Before I'm cutting you off here, but you know what I think it would be a good idea is when we finally get autonomous vehicles where I can drive across the continent to Denver, in 2 days or a day and just sleep through it. Yeah. I want that car to charge. So maybe it pulls up to a robotic charging station. So that's interesting.
No, and that's another example where electric miles are going to increase in the kind of future where the car can drive itself. You're going to think nothing of, let's leave town at midnight, sleep, and then arrive in another city, at 8 o'clock in the morning or something. Electric cars are just going to be driven more. And
if it's powered by wind and solar and batteries, then that's displacing what you might take a plane for. You might be more likely to take a car that way.
Yeah. And also, speaking of robots, there was a story this week where there was a robot playing chess with a kid. Did you see that story?
Yeah, I heard about it. I saw the headline.
And the robot accidentally grabbed the kid's finger and broke it.
Ow, ow,
So-
ow, 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 ow.
So we have to be careful. about the
Be
robot
careful with
future.
robots, people.
Yeah.
Canada's ZEV registrations soar 50% year over year. That's, we're at 7.7 market share in Canada, which
Yeah, for new car
5%
sales,
is
yep.
the tipping point, and we're 50% past that already in Canada, where we've had, crappy incentives nationally, some good ones locally from time to time in local provincial jurisdictions. But it's 50% more than the U.S. too, which has only just hit 5% at the end of last year. Brian, did you know that global wind energy costs have declined 72% since 2009?
That is staggering.
And they continue to decline. And with technological improvements, site placement improvements, and things like that, Washington, D.C. is moving to ban natural gas in most new buildings. This is something we talk about regularly. Different jurisdictions and sometimes cities are banning natural gas. This is, I wouldn't say it's a cold climate in Washington, but it's not,
Coldish.
California. It's not Southern California. Energy use fell during 2020 in all U.S. states. This is the pandemic. Can you guess which state it didn't?
Yeah, I'm going to guess Alaska
Good
because
guess.
it's written right in front of me.
Yes, because it's right there. Cheater. Any theories as to why it didn't fall in Alaska? They just go, the pandemic means nothing to them and the life just goes on.
Yeah, I guess the rhythm of life is probably different there. It's more kind of pandemic-like all the time, I guess. People don't go out.
I'm trying not to have Alaskan stereotypes enter into play here. If you're listening in Alaska, and by the way, EV adoption is fairly strong in Alaska. It is above the U.S. average.
Wow, that's
You
great.
would not expect that. A, cold
No.
climate. B, conservative, rugged individualist type of thing, but no. And finally this week, Brian, Chinese solar installations are up 137% year on year. People say China's not doing enough. Well, they're going strong. They've more than doubled their year-on-year solar output compared to the first half of the year before. So that's good news. That's our time for this week, and then some. Contact us at thecleanenergyshow@gmail.com right now. Let us know what you think. If you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app and like and anything like that. Give us a review if you care to. New episodes will be delivered to you every week because we're here, Brian, every week for you, for us. We have fun. See you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.